Hello, Service Learning students. It is Thursday afternoon, June 16th, and I just posted lesson number 4 as we begin unit number 2. And I thought it would be helpful if I did this screencast to go over a couple of the resources posted for your first major project. As I mentioned in the lesson notes and the screencast that is in those lesson notes for lesson number 4, we are entering probably the most important phase of the course where we actually start to build our service learning project. So what we want to do, I'm going to click on the screen here to show you and walk you through a couple of these things, is you want to go to unit number 2, and you'll see that there's the lesson for today posted, but throughout this unit while we're working on our proposals, you'll note that this part of the unit 2 area will be here. It will persist. It is a folder that I've developed that has all the resources you need to complete the project. So we'll walk through a series of lessons over the next couple weeks developing our proposals, but we'll keep coming back to this one specific space that is focused on really getting you to write this very detailed report that is the proposal for your service learning project that has to be proposed, that has to be approved by your instructor. But it's also one of the major writing assignments in the course, and it's set up in a way that stresses the inquiry guided learning that is part of the outcomes for the FYI 169 AB course. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this link in this folder that I've set up under resources, and what you'll see is so far, and there will be more elements that will be posted in this, and some of these elements will be updated, but so far you'll see that you have a project proposal guideline here. You have a proposal ideas and links page, which is just kind of an open-ended item that allows me to post updated information. It's really just a listing of the kind of projects and areas that students have done in the last couple years for their service projects, and then when I get information from folks about other projects, I just add that in there. And then once we get into the heart of the writing itself, you'll note that there's a section here devoted to writing resources. There's a folder with several links that will take you to areas that will help you with your actual writing of the report, and APA formatting, which is the requirement for this report. And there's a folder. This may be something that's useful for you to look at today. There's a folder of student samples, 4 student samples from the past 2 times when the course has been taught, and we have, in both cases, we have students who have done an individual project and a team project, and so those are listed in there. And then there's the writing rubric, which we'll discuss as we get closer to the time when you'll be submitting your draft proposal and your final proposal. We'll have a bit of a screencast or a mini lesson on what a writing rubric is. So a lot of information for you to digest. I don't expect you to get it all completely integrated at this point. It's mostly put out here for you to have some examples to give you an idea of what you're aiming for, and the idea, as I said in the lesson notes today, is that you get exposed to it, and then over the next couple weeks you'll keep coming back to it again and again and again, and it should help you with the development of your project. I'm aware that it's a lot of material, but even in class versus online, it's very important that these reports have all these details in them. So there's really no other way than to really outline as clearly as possible the expectations. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to focus today on the actual project proposal handout, and so I'm going to click on this link. So eventually you will turn in a draft proposal and a final proposal for what your service learning project should be. So this handout has all the rules and requirements, the grading scheme, everything. It's the document that tells you what's going to be going on for this project. And as such, it's divided into sections that are meant to be fairly easy to access and follow. But the overall report, as you can see in those student samples that I've shared with you, is going to be divided into 4 basic areas, and I'm going to go over those and then highlight a few areas in the handout that are important. In the classroom, we can project this handout on the screen. Students have a chance to look it over, read it, come back with some questions or concerns, and then we address those as a class. You working independently at home, wherever you are this summer, it's going to be incumbent upon you to review the handout. Where you have questions, contact me, because I don't know if you're having issues or concerns or not. The other thing I want you to be aware of is that obviously it is a substantial document. There are really the two major writing assignments are the ones at the beginning of the course and at the end of the course. And the proposal in a regular classroom generally comes in right before midterm. So that gives you some sense of time that students are working on this. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to have you go through and outline areas that are, this is part of the inquiry element, areas that are strengths for you as a student, what you're studying at CSC, what your background is, your skills inventory, and then how that might be applied to service learning project. And the other thing you have to do is you have to make a case for this area of need within the community you're thinking of serving and what specifically you would do. So it's a proposal, it's a written report, it's meant to follow that sort of format. The overview of the project gives you kind of those basic ideas and shows how the report is divided up into these 4 parts. Overall, the final report is worth 200 points, and it has each of these sections. There's not a specific grade that's given to each section when it's graded, when the final proposal is graded, but generally you should be aware that each of these areas is going to have this amount of weight. So the first part, which is important to me, but perhaps less important for somebody who's actually reading this report, and I would like you to consider that this is an actual report that might go out before a committee, a community action partner, an institution that is thinking about doing a project. You want to have kind of a professional tone, and you want to illustrate for the readers what it is you're going to be doing and why it's needed, why it's a needed service. So within that context, you want to have sort of a professional tone, and you want to introduce the first part, who you are and how you have certain expertise or skills that can address the identified areas of need in the community. And then in part 2, so that's about 15% of the grade, and then it gets more important. The part 2 and part 3 obviously are weighted a little bit more heavily, so those are the most important parts of the report. Part 2 is the inquiry element, where you make a case for there being an issue or concern in the community, and here this is going to involve some actual research and details and background information to illustrate that this is indeed an area that needs some attention from whatever skills you can apply. And then part 3 is a very detailed action plan, and this is really practical for me as your instructor and for you as the person who's going to be doing the service, because once we sort of approve these proposals and then we move into the third phase of the course, you will actually go and do these things. So I need to know what you're planning to do, what hours your service you're going to be doing, what specifically that's going to entail, and there's different handouts and elements that are part of that, and so that's a very detailed part of the proposal, obviously. And then part 4 is really to fulfill the requirements of this course as a first-year inquiry. It has a requirement for an annotated bibliography, a bibliography of at least 10 sources that relate to the area of service that you're looking at, and that sort of provide some of the research and background information that we hope will support your endeavors. You'll see that the draft is due in lesson 7 in June 27th, around that time, and then the final proposal is due after the 4th of July. But you have a lot of work to do in between then and now, so let's go through it. The basic report, as you can see in the student samples, and I'll refer to these student samples again and again over the coming weeks, should have a professional appearance. It should follow this format. It should be an APA format. There are resources posted in this lesson area for how to do APA formatting. You need a title page, you need an abstract, then it needs to follow obviously in order part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4 as per those examples I just shared with you. I do want to stress here, you'll see in this handout it talks about collaboration and team projects. I don't know how well this is going to work this summer. It's the first time we've done this online. But in the classroom, I really encourage students to work together, and if we can form teams, it makes the work easier for everyone, including the instructor, who then only has to supervise a handful of projects. We have 23 students, I think, enrolled at this point, 23 projects going on across variety of communities across the country is going to be kind of challenging. But if you think that you might be able to collaborate with someone who's also in the course and is in an area that's close to you where you guys could work together, or if you could do individual parts in different communities but then collaborate on the report, that would be great. That would help all of us. We'll do some discussion forum activities next week where people will start to share some of their ideas of reports, of proposals, and there might be a way to facilitate some collaboration then. The grading, I won't spend too much time going over this now. Know that there's a grading rubric that will be used to assess your writing. And what I want to stress now is the three main parts that are part of the proposal proper. First one is the background skills inventory, and like I said, this is important for me probably more than it would be in an actual report that would be submitted to a committee or whatever. But what I want you to do is I want you to outline in kind of a formal way your resume, basically, who you are and what your background is that can relate to the project that's going to follow in this report. The reader's going through this report in this order, and what you're trying to say is, I'm actually someone who's skilled enough to be able, and I have this expertise and background, or I have these interests and I'm willing to learn. These are the things I can bring to the table in order to complete the project. So that's the first part of the report. And there's prompts there to help you sort of outline that element. And it may not help you at the beginning now when you're getting ready to write these reports, but as you start to structure the report, go back through and look at those prompts and make sure you've covered all the areas. Part 2 is very important. This is the inquiry element. And what you need to do in part 2, and I hope the handout makes this clear, is you need to make a case. You need to make a case to your instructor and to the readers of your report that there is a genuine problem that is in this community that you want to address, and that is a problem that is doable in the summertime we have together, and that is a problem that you have the skills in order to address, and that it is something that is an actual service project. The example is given there that road repair might be a very significant challenge in a community, but we don't have road building equipment, so we can't really go out and join the road crew and fix potholes. You need to pick something that has an element that you can apply as a college student, your own expertise. You need to outline what the problem is, what you think the cause of the problem is, and then you need to document that this problem, so some sort of outside research, and this could include surveys from people in the region, it could be interviews, it could be elements from that service learning folder that's posted in the first part of in resources, and there's all these national organizations that provide statistics and background, let's say on hunger or on areas of need for housing and things like that. Notice that in this documentation part here, it states that as you bring in these outside sources, you'll need to cite them at the end of your paper in APA format. So I hope you're aware of how to do that, and if not, again, those writing resources should be able to help you with that. So part 3, the last thing I'm going to talk about in this screencast, is the actual action plan and the bibliography part 4. What I want to stress here is that your action plan, this is where you outline what you're specifically going to do, what community partners you're going to work with. You have to work with a community partner. You can't just do this on your own. I had a student one semester who wanted to do a community cleanup project, and his idea was just to go out with a stick with a nail on it and start picking up trash. I told him, you have to work with Keep Shadron Beautiful. You have to have a community partner. It's a requirement for the course. It's a requirement for your project, so keep that in mind. Timeline and task list, and there's elements of the ALPS, the Action Learning Plan for Service, from your book, page 31, in Learning Through Serving, that you will fill out to make very complete what the actual project is that you're going to do. So this is a very important part of the report. And then not only that, you need to argue at the end of this part of the report about how your actions are actually going to address the problem. And then part 4, the bibliography, 10 sources. It explains how these must be substantial sources, not just internet sites. 5 of them at least must be text-based sources or library sources, and how they need to be cited in APA format. So I'm going to finish here, and then I'll come back with a screencast that discusses the rules and restrictions of this project. That's a very important element that we need to talk about.